retreat to the tropics, and I've come back, and I'm happy to get back to work.
I think the wrong button was pressed just now.
Hi, who's the backup rabbi?
Did everyone get kicked off, or did I just get kicked off?
Just you.
So I was just saying how happy I was to start, and then it kicked me out of the room. It's not a good sign, but we will persevere. And I think I have the live stream going. Let me press the record button just for good measure, so Brian's happy, and everyone who can't make it on gets to watch. We're starting the third and final leg of our year-long Why Be Different class, an introduction to Judaism, and we are ready for the life cycle. And that's probably where we do the life cycle. In the end, we have a couple of classes with about Israel denominations, some history, and then we're done. A full year of classes. So it's we'll think of something to do for Why Be Different Part 2 for next year. Maybe do an intermediate class or something. But in the meantime, we have a lot of fun in front of us. And I was trying. You could start the life cycle just about anywhere. I mean, I guess it'd be kind of depressing to start with death. You wouldn't want to start with death. But I mean, you could start with marriage, you could start with birth. I just decided to start with birth, and we'll do marriage at the next class in 2 weeks. We'll probably spend the class after that getting ready for Pesach, and then we'll do death and dying, and then I'll do sort of some classes about conversions, about the practical issues for conversions, the denominations, and whatever information you need. And but so we're going to start with birth today. We're going to start with birth rituals and those sorts of things. And with that, I'm going to power up my PowerPoint. I hope everyone can see. I'll talk. I think I try to gauge how much material I have. I feel like I have about 35 minutes of stuff to talk about. Well, we'll see how it goes. But either way, we'll have plenty of time tonight for some conversation and some questions. If a question comes up during the presentation, you don't have to wait till the end. You can get my attention, and I'll stop and try to answer the question. Let me make this a little bigger. So we start off, we don't want to end up like the Shakers. The future belongs to those who show up for it. And the very important part of Jewish life, a very important part of being a human being, obviously, is the mission of procreation. You have this beautiful verse in Isaiah that not for chaos did God create the world. God created the world because he wanted it filled with life, filled with people. And we believe that the presence of people, that the presence of Jews and all sorts of different people, that makes God happy, that he loves humanity, and he wants to see us flourish and to prosper. And so the very first commandment in the Torah, pru uvu, be fruitful and multiply, not just a good idea, it's the law. And you ask immediately, well, that's like the dumbest commandment ever. Who needs to be reminded to do that? But we need to be reminded to do that, it turns out. The birth rate in the West is below replacement as we speak. And it's particularly in the environment we're in, we need to remind ourselves that we appreciate the stress that humans can place on the environment, the carrying capacity, but we don't want to err on the other side. We don't want to err on the side of despising natality, despising humanity to the point where people die out. And there are countries in the world that are dying out because the future belongs to those who show up to it, and they aren't replacing themselves. The replacement rate for Jews, the fertility rate, really varies about where you are. In Israel, it's above. It's well above replacement, even if you don't look at the Haredim. If you throw the Haredim in, it's like 3. But if you don't look at if you look at like secular and normally religious Jews who aren't Haredim, it's about 2.5. So Israel has a very healthy fertility rate. And in the Jews that are in the States and in the West, it's not that high. It's well below replacement. And this is. But we have this. We look at it not as just as an opportunity, but a religious task to be fruitful and multiply. We say that with all sympathy. We know that not everybody gets to fulfill this mitzvah, but everybody has a stake in Judaism and in humanity continuing. Because we make everything kind of a law. I mean, we just don't say be fruitful and multiply and walk away from it. We start to define, well, what it means. What is the actual requirement? And because we disagree about everything, there's disagreements in the Talmud and the Mishnah about how one satisfies the commandment to be fruitful and multiply. Beit Shammai, who is sort of like usually is just the foil for Beit Hillel, is the one that we are rooting against. Beit Shammai says that 2 male children are the requirement. And Beit Hillel says that the requirement is 1 male and 1 female. There's obviously some misogyny going on here. Every child, every new human being is a gift and a cause for celebration. But you see the context of the joke from Fiddler on the Roof, Tevye. I have 5 daughters. He has 5 kids, and he hasn't fulfilled yet the commandment of Pru Urvu from what his rabbis tell him, this little shtetl in Anatevka. And so, but we also have the sensitivity of after the Holocaust. Elliot Dorff talks a lot about the mitzvah of the 3rd Jewish child, that because we suffered so many losses during the Holocaust demographically, roughly 1/3 of the world Jewish population was murdered, and we only achieved the level of population of Jews prior to the Holocaust, about 18 million prior to the Holocaust. We've only equaled that recently. It's taken 70 years simply to rebuild the population that we had in 1939. And and so when Elliot Dorff talks about the mitzvah of the 3rd Jewish child, I mean, there are you talk to plenty of Jews and they say that this is our, I mean, it's terrible to talk about having children for revenge, but this is our answer. This is our answer for what was done to us, to try to replace, you can't replace the people, but we can replace the numbers of Jews that were murdered in the Shoah. So we start with the idea that having children is not just a good idea for Jews, it's the law. We're required religiously. We see this as a religious obligation. We have too, though, the opportunity of adoption for those that, there are reasons that couples are infertile and they can't have children. But we do have this precious institute of adoption, and the Talmud reminds us whoever raises a child is like a parent. And this is it could be expressed as either the process of formal adoption, but it's also expressed in the way that we are always helping other people's children. A teacher is like a parent. A mentor is like a parent. There are parental roles that transcend the sort of the strict biological roles in which we usually consider them. Now, even though the Talmud has this nice maxim, this nice dicta, whoever raises a child is like a parent, It's also striking that there are not procedures in Jewish family law for adoption. That there's no, when a Jewish couple adopts a child, it's something that's done statutorily according to the civil law. There's not really a Jewish adoption ritual. What we have decided in modern practice, and this is the consensus in current rabbinic practice, we regard the adopted child as one would a biological child with regards to family. That's to say mom and dad are mom and dad. The brothers and sisters are brothers and sisters, that the adopted child is like, in terms of family law, is just like a child that appeared biologically. But we don't regard them with that in regards to ritual law. So if the adopted child is not Jewish, they don't become Jewish simply by being adopted. There has to be a procedure of conversion. Or if the parent, if dad is a Kohen, the adopted child does not become a Kohen, even though the father is considered to be the father in terms of family law. Ritually, we don't pass that status on to the adopted child. So there are some manners in which the adopted children are not in which there are you could call them restrictions or limitations. One of my predecessors here was a Kohen, and he had adopted children, and even though they were called up to the Torah as the son of Rav Yosef, of the father, they did not inherit the priestly status that he had, and this is the distinction that we make in adoption between the family law and ritual law. I'm just going to go until we get to like somebody actually being born, and then I'll stop the questions, but we're still on the way to like the child actually appearing. I've done classes on both of these topics before, so I'm not going to go into depth, but for purposes of introduction, you should know that female birth control is permitted under Jewish law in order to control the timing of childbirth, that it's considered to be the woman's prerogative to decide when she wants to have children, and therefore she is allowed to use contraception in order to time when she will be a mother, when she will have children. Male birth control is prohibited. Male birth control is prohibited. So very, very basic. I mean, I don't know if I need to go through the mechanics of it, but there is birth control that women use, and there's birth control that men use. Women are entitled to use birth control. Men are not. And that can create issues in some circumstances where a woman is medically unable to use birth control, and then that has to be addressed rabbinically. But in general, this is the procedure we usually use. The question of abortion usually comes up, and is going to come up again. I'm sort of nervous about it. It's a case in the Supreme Court, and I've done classes on it in the past. I'm sure I'll be called upon to speak about this in the future. But generally speaking, Jews have a negative attitude towards abortion, but also a negative attitude towards making it illegal. That there are different rabbinic perspectives about when it is allowed, but every rabbinic perspective wants the reshut. They want the permission to be able to have Jewish women conduct their lives according to Jewish family law, as opposed to non-Jewish family law. So we tend to be pro-choice on the political issue, but we tend to be kind of conservative about whether or not abortion is appropriate. Abortion generally is permitted in cases where the health of the mother is endangered. And this is defined broadly. It doesn't have to be that her life is endangered. And the expert that we turn to tell whether the woman's health is in danger is the woman herself. We're all regarded as the most important experts as we are about our own health. And so this is not something where you get a note from the doctor or you get a permission from somebody else. If the woman feels that the abortion is dangerous to her health, we generally say as a matter of Jewish family law that abortion in that case can be permitted and can be done. Not finally, we still haven't had a baby yet, but we're getting there, closer and closer. Very important, we urge all couples, part of the standard premarital counseling I give, to undergo genetic testing before they get married. both Ashkenazim and Sephardim. I mean, there's some people that focus on the on Ashkenazim because 1 in 27 Ashkenazi Jews carry a recessive copy of the gene for Tay-Sachs disease, which is a devastating neurodegenerative disorder that usually will kill the baby that's afflicted within 1 or 2 years of being born, which is simply a devastating circumstance. And is something that if both parents have a copy of this recessive gene, there's a 25% chance that any child that they have will have Tay-Sachs expressed. They'll have the disease, and it's simply something that you want to know about before you start to plan your family. So we are very we urge both members of the couple to get genetic testing. We do this whether or not one member of the couple is a convert or not. You just want to know ahead of time. And so we urge that it's a part of the process of getting married and having children that Jewish couples are strongly urged to undergo genetic testing to make sure that they know what their vulnerabilities to the genetic diseases that are common among Jews are. And now finally, I think we're close to having a baby now. Pregnancy. The appropriate greeting to a pregnant woman, and this is if she tells you she's pregnant. You never assume. This is just common sense, but this gets violated all the time. If you know that a woman is pregnant because she's told you she's pregnant, the appropriate greeting is b'sha'a tova, in a good hour. And that just means that it goes back to superstitions from the Talmud that babies born at certain hours have certain characteristics. And you want to be sure that you want to wish that, well, your baby will be born in a good hour, that the baby will have this characteristics. It also has the sense today of please sometime between 6 a.m. and 10 o'clock at night. It's a very civilized time to have a child. My first child was very reasonable. She came to us at like 3 p.m. That's like prime baby having time. The Daniel was less reasonable. He showed up at 5 a.m. That was very stressful. We were happy to see him anyway. But we do not say Mazel Tov. We do not say Mazel Tov because many aspects of our approach to this have to do with superstition. And if you say Mazel Tov, you're inviting bad luck. And if people are from sort of like a traditional point of view, they'll draw back at this. I mean, not everybody has this sensitivity, but you have to. I mean, we have to go to war with the army we have. We're a superstitious people, and it's important to be aware of that. This is something that's really has sort of changed before my eyes. But in olden days, like back when I was a young rabbi, 3 decades ago or so, well, 2 decades ago, there were no baby showers for Jews. It was simply unheard of that you don't set up, you don't paint the nursery, you don't give gifts. One of my best friends in North Philadelphia was one of the biggest furniture salesmen in North Philadelphia. Their family would not deliver furniture for infants until they knew that the baby had been born. And they didn't care who they were working with, Jews or non-Jews. They would not deliver the furniture simply because it's considered to be inviting bad luck. And even if you aren't superstitious, and you just imagine, pregnancy is very risky, something could happen. I mean, what could be more devastating than going back to your house and seeing like the nursery that's been painted and seeing the furniture? It'd just be terrible. So we don't, so it's sort of a hedge against that. There used to be like the difference between Jews and non-Jews, that Jews never had baby showers, just because this was considered to be something that other people did. Since I've been out here, and I think around the world, I think that this sort of like, I think it's decaying. I think that we've had baby showers in this community. I'm aware that there's been baby showers for Jews around the country. So that's a piece of culture that is changing. But and whether or not, if you're in the position you want to have a baby shower, is of course up to you. But just for purposes of planning and being aware that there is this culture of not doing it. And when you announce that you're doing it in somebody who's older, like me apparently, or someone else hears that, they might draw back a little bit. simply because this was something that was not done in previous times. So that's kind of the warm up to the baby so the baby is going to arrive in an instant, but before the baby does arrive, are there questions about procreation, pregnancy, and superstition? I'll stop the share and we'll think about this.
Actually, I had a question about something you mentioned about adoption, about how they're treated as, family members for the purpose of, the family unit, but not necessarily treated as family members for ritual purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that if you were to adopt, say, an uncircumcised 5-year-old, that he would have to go through a bris?
Well, the assumption is that, and it is an assumption, but the assumption is that the parents would want to convert the child in that case. And in that case, if the baby was not circumcised, you would try to do a Brit Milah at some point. After a certain age, at certain ages, it gets very tricky, and you really would want to sort of like rabbinic and medical guidance, and probably talk to a lot of different people, maybe someone who has gone through it, to figure out what to do, because it's a very psychologically for the child, that's an extremely difficult thing to look at. So, I could just blithely give you the rule. Well, yes, of course, you would want to have the child circumcised, but in a difficult situation like that, you would really want to talk to a lot of people and get a lot of guidance of how to go about that.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
I have a question.
Hi, Sarah.
I've read a little bit, about family purity rules.
So Sarah, I'm having trouble.
Cycle, when it's your time of the month, there's separate beds, or there's a bed situation. Is there some sort of bedroom setup or any?
So you were going really, I think it's the connection. You went really, really slow, and then it all sped up at once. And so could you type the question? I'm sorry. No, you should not. I apologize. We apologize, Sarah. But if you type the question out, I'm happy to.
Rabbi?
Nori.
Well, she's typing. I can only speak, because of course I spent many years in Israel, and a lot of it in community nursing, and I used to work on a religious, moshav nov, a religious moshav, and women did use birth control, but they would never tell their husbands, because if the husband knew that the seed was wasted, that would be, objectionable. But almost everybody practiced birth control. They just would never tell their husbands. Of course, the husbands knew, but see, is there something to that, or is that just an Orthodox custom?
Well, there is something to that, but I'm going to try not to be judgmental. I really feel that communication is important about that. There's no halakhic reason that the wife needs to lie to her husband about what she's doing. If she's frightened by her husband for discovering that she's on birth control, that's not good. But we live in kind of a different world. It's easy to judge. Maybe there's something to it. I think that halakhically there's no compulsion for the husband does not have to be misled in order to do his duty.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, at least, of course, we left in 1999, and maybe things are different now. But when I lived in Israel all those years, abortion was extremely acceptable, even among the Orthodox community. And again, the Orthodox wouldn't always tell their neighbors, but abortion was really a non-issue. We had a committee, that decided whether the abortion was permitted. But I remember vividly, taking care of women, Orthodox, secular, and it was really not much of an issue. Or abortion was in Israel was quite accepted in those days.
It's hard in the American context to communicate just how lenient some Jewish sources about abortion are. I mean, I wrote something for like the website or whatever about this Texas law, and I respect that there are people in the community who have more stringent positions about abortion than I do. And I mean, they have sources, and I have to respect those sources. But they have to respect the sources that give tremendous leniency and tremendous shooting permission for the woman to make a lot of choices. And in the American context, it just what is happening to the Jewish debate in America is we're becoming Americans. I mean, to be a conservative, to be a conservative Jew, not a conservative Jew, but an actual politically conservative Jew is understood to mean to be anti-abortion. And I don't know if that's happening in Israel as well, but that's a development that's at odds with the actual Jewish sources about abortion, which I don't think one can deny that there are tremendously lenient approaches to it that are within halakha. So Michael.
Well, this wasn't my initial question, but I think I remember you saying at one point something, either at the university or here, that Judaism links life with breath more than with heartbeat, and that makes a tremendous difference. I mean, that's straight out of Genesis, actually.
That's true. I hate to sound like a maniac about this, but it's really important I believe that Jewish discussions about abortion should go back to the rabbinic sources about abortion, and it's difficult. I'm not talking to you, Michael. I'm talking to the universe, but it's difficult to convince people that to do that, and we end up understanding it through an American lens, which things like heartbeat or viability, which do not really register within the halakhic sources. I mean, maybe the halakhic sources are wrong and need to be updated, but in order to, if you're going to discard the halakhic sources, you should know the halakhic sources first. Again, not talking to Michael or necessarily to anyone who's on this on this Zoom. Sarah, I'll do Sarah and then I'll do Don. Sarah writes, in purity laws, the married bed gets separated during a woman's cycle. Are there rules about how married couples act during pregnancy? Absolutely. And I promise to get to those when we do marriage in 2 weeks. But that's an important question, Sarah. Thank you. And now, John.
Well, the custom among the Orthodox of having many, many children, is that just based on the be fruitful and multiply without limits? Or does that have something to do with the being frowned upon birth control? Or where does that custom come from?
There's a whole sociology behind it. Before the rise of social insurance, your future, your wealth, your survival into old age was having kids that were going to take care of you when I get too old to if I'm living 100 years ago and I somehow managed to live like past 75 or something, which would be a personal record for men in my family, but I somehow managed to do that, 100 years ago, I'm not going to get a social security. I'm not going to get a check from the government to do anything. My ability to live is going to be to have kids that I'm going to rely on to take care of me. And so a lot of it is carry over from the way things were. These are groups that are not necessarily integrated into kind of our vision of social democracy. But part of it too is the community that was hit hardest by Hitler, the community that was hit hardest by the Shoah, were the Haredim. They bled the most of any community, and they have correspondingly the strongest desire to rebuild and to repopulate, and that's a large part of it too. I'm convinced.
So that was not such a custom before the Shoah?
I think before the Shoah, it was the custom for everyone. I mean, before modernity, that was your future, was your kids. That was the more the merrier. You know, it'll be tough for the next 25 years, but after that, if you raise them well, you've got it made in the shade.
I guess that especially applied to farm families. I know of quite a few families of old-time Mainers who lived on farms, and they had lots of kids so they could work on the farm.
Yeah, it's the pre-modern culture in some ways is not that modern, but yes, thank you, Don, and hi Terry, welcome. So I'm going to move ahead for the actual birth part of this class on childbirth. I'll share the screen yet again, cycle through where I need to be. So we have a boy or a girl. Every boy or girl needs a name. And so we have naming customs, and we talk about this, the Hebrew name, the Yiddish name, the Jewish name, whatever. Conceptually, this does not have to be different than the secular name. I mean, there's no requirement that the Hebrew name be in Hebrew. I mean, there are rabbis named Rabbi Peter. There are Jews in my family named Mark. I know of Jews named Luke. These are obviously not Hebrew names, but the name is whatever your parents decide to name you. It's kind of the Johnny Cash rule. So you could have Susie Bat Rona being called to the Torah, and indeed, my children have one set of names. They don't have a secular name and they don't have a Hebrew name. My daughter is. Her name is Rivka Chana, and my son's name is Daniel Asher. And they go through the world with those names. It kind of makes it easier. But for a lot of contemporary times, the Hebrew name is often different than the secular name. And this permits us to honor the heritage on the one hand, particularly if we want to name after a relative. But it also says maybe it's not that useful for a kid to go through like business school or something named Yechezkel or Yeshayahu or something. And so there's an inside, particularly in America, there's sort of an inside-outside aspect to this, that you have your American name, but you have your Hebrew name that's different than that. Both of those you can pick whatever you want to do. There aren't any rules, but there are customs. And the most well-known custom is that the Ashkenazim do not name after the living. And this is largely for superstitious reasons. The idea is that if you take somebody's name and you put it on somebody else, that the person who you take the name from is in trouble. They could be vulnerable. So Ashkenazim do not live after the living. Sephardim name after whoever they want to. But it's extremely common in many Sephardi communities to name after grandparents, whether the grandparents are alive or dead. So if I look through like a Sephardi genealogy, you'll just go back for hundreds and hundreds of years, Moshe, Yitzchak, Moshe, Yitzchak, the firstborn son gets the paternal grandfather's name, and it just recycles through the ages, which can make figuring out who's who after a bit kind of difficult, because a lot of the names are the same. But Sephardim do not have the hang up that Ashkenazim have about naming after the living. One thing to be aware of, particularly among Ashkenazim, is the phenomena of Holocaust names. That's to say, it's not really traditional going back hundreds of years for Jews to have 4 or 5 names. But after the destruction of European Jewry, and after the prospect of there being millions of people who don't have only Yad Vashem Tov Mi Banim Vanot, that the prospect of them not having the continuation, it was so painful. And when you see somebody called to the Torah in their Mikael, Yitzchak, Avraham, Favel, Ben, such and such, a long list of names, what has generally happened in that circumstance is they put as many names as they can on the kid, in order that the memory of the people that were murdered has some survival. People who are deprived of having children, people who are deprived of their lineage, will live on in the names that people have. So that's why Ashkenazi names tend to get long, and are a little bit longer than they have been, or than Sephardim tend to be with their names. Most Sephardim just have one name. But the name is picked by the parents. It's a very emotional thing, and a lot of times a lot of negotiation. So my wife and I, we were clever. We had our kids last. So by the time we had kids, everyone who needed to be named for had already been named. And so we could pick whatever names we wanted. So we just picked Rebecca and Daniel. If they're not named after anybody in the family, there was because all of those had been taken. But if those names aren't taken, and if people aren't named, it can be a very emotional dance between new parents and their parents about how the names of the past are transmitted into the future. And again, I tell when couples come to me for advice, I remind them, well, one, it is your choice, it's your kid, it's your name, but you need to be aware, you need to be sensitive to the customs and to the norms that your parents are going to have. You need to be sensitive to their feelings, that if it's where they're coming from. There is an expectation that we're going to honor the past with their names and continuing the memories of the people who came before us. The first ritual for boys is the Brit Milah. Baby boys are circumcised on the 8th day. I lived through my son's Brit Milah. It was extremely emotional experience. I mean, it's 8 days after having a kid. You're dead tired, and for some reason you're throwing a huge party for a ton of people. And if you're the rabbi, everyone's there, so it's exhausting. So I think people know that circumcision is you make a cut, the foreskin of the penis is removed. The responsibility to circumcise the son falls on the father. And since most of us don't have the facility to do it, we generally appoint a moel or a mohelet these days to do it, somebody who's trained to do circumcisions. There's some sort of there's a movement among non-Jews who want to be circumcised to use mohalim or a mohalot because they feel that because they do it all the time, they're better at it. I think they are better at it than a urologist. I think that if you're doing something like that, you want somebody who's thinking about that when they get up in the morning and thinks about it all day. But so you usually retain a moel to do it, or a mohelet. We have a mohelet in Maine, Dr. Mindy Gold, who is, I've really enjoyed working with her, and the parents that I've worked with her, I have found her to be really reliable and wonderful. Sometimes the for whatever reason, the parents will opt for circumcising the child medically before the 8th day. This counts for the child is circumcised. They don't need to be recircumcised. But we do, if that's not for ritual purposes, we have to have a ceremony where we extract a drop of blood from the penis under religious supervision. That's called a hatafat brit dam. And that's that's at a young age, that's a really trivial procedure. When we do it for adults, it's an awkward procedure, but it is not painful. It's just very, very awkward. Circumcision is put off if there are pressing health issues. We don't do anything to endanger a child. If the circumcision has to be postponed, it is postponed. There are cases where it's never indicated to circumcise because of health issues, and the person goes through their life uncircumcised as a Jew. And health is the most important thing. And it's the custom to give the Hebrew name at the Brit Milah. That's the moment in which we give the name, people dance, and herring is apparently served. For daughters, I mean, again, there's much misogyny in the tradition. Usually they were just, they're given the name the way that anyone is given a name. Well, your name is such and such. But in modern times, we've elevated the celebration of our daughters with the ceremony of the Simchat Bat, the celebration of a newborn daughter. This is simply a ceremony to celebrate the birth of a daughter, and this is when we bestow the Hebrew name. There's no set or correct time to do this, and that makes the Simchat Bat a lot more fun as a parent than the Brit Milah was. I think we did our Simchat Bat for Rebecca when she was like 3 months old or so. And by that time we had fully recovered from the travel, well, not fully, you never recover from being a parent, but the initial trauma of birthing her and bringing her home and being new parents had alleviated a little bit. And we could enjoy that quite a bit more than we could enjoy the Brit Milah for Daniel, since we had just felt like we had been run over and when we were, for some reason, throwing a party. So, but that's one of the perks of not having to be circumcised. You can do it whenever you're ready to do it, and it's a joyous and fun time. There is a very rare ceremony that you run into from time to time called the Pidyon Haben, the redemption of the firstborn. And remember that in the times of the Bible, the firstborn were supposed to be dedicated to the temple. They were the firstborn. The Bechorim were the priests before the Leviim took over, and so they still belong to God or to the priest. And we have to redeem them under certain circumstances. Not every child needs to be redeemed. This happens only in a minority of cases, but this if the firstborn is a son, and if the firstborn is not born via cesarean, it is to be a natural birth, and if neither grandfather is a Kohen or a Levi, the child is liable to be redeemed. And the ceremony for redemption can take place anytime after the child is 30 days old. I had colleagues in rabbinical school who got to rabbinical school before they figured out that they hadn't been redeemed. And so we did the redemption for them when they were like older, like in their 20s. So it has to be done sometime after 30 days. It's good to do it earlier, of course, because people forget, apparently, in some cases. But you have to give the Kohen who's redeeming the child a certain amount of silver. And it's traditional to give them 5 silver coins. And in order for that to be the correct amount of silver, we use pre-1936 silver dollars, the Morgan silver dollar, 5 of them. And I checked before on eBay, you can get them, they don't have to be pristine or anything. You can get well-circulated Morgan silver dollars for about $20 a shot or so on eBay. And so that's between $100 and $120 to redeem the child. They have like gift sets you can buy, Pidyon, Haben coin collectible sets, but those all cost hundreds of dollars more, $250, $300, $400. Don't pay that. Pay that. Get the you get the cheap Morgan silver dollars pre-1936. Buy them on eBay. This is the way to go. And there's a formula. You give this money to the priest, and you've made his day because you've given him more than $100. Michael's smiling a little bit. He's
This has never happened to me.
you need to set up a concession. This is not a procedure for every birth. It's maybe 15% of births need to, you're looking at a Pidyon Haben.
Does the Kohen have to donate the money to the shul, or they can spend it any way they want, or?
He can spend it any way he wants. Sometimes I've seen them give it. Sometimes I've seen them give the money back, but that's awkward. You don't want them to give the money back. You want them to go have a good time. It's if there was ever a problem of like somebody coming up with the coins, we'd get the coins for them. This is not a common occurrence. The major taking things up to bar mitzvah, which is where we're going to leave off. The major responsibility of parents in this period of childhood is to inspire a love of Judaism and for the Jewish people and their children, and to give them the tools to live Jewish lives. And this is something I feel very strongly about, that a comprehensive Jewish education enables the children to decide the areas of Jewish life they wish to explore and embrace. It's not my job to predict or know what my kids are going to do, whether they're going to be Haredim living on the West Bank, or whether they're going to be Reform Jews in Cincinnati, Ohio, Renewal Jews smoking pot in Oregon. It's not my job to decide what they're going to do. It's my job to give them the tools to express Judaism wherever they decide to go. And that means giving them the most comprehensive education as possible. That if I make assumptions about what they're going to do, that's going to lead me to impair their ability to decide what they want to do. And so that the great gift that we can give is the tools to navigate and to feel comfortable in a variety of Jewish settings, so that they can decide what they're going to do. The kids are not from us; they go through us. But their ability to live their lives as Jews is going to depend on the tools that we give them, and this is to me the major responsibility of Jewish parents. Truly liberal Jewish education does not make assumptions about what aspects of the tradition are useful or practical. Turn it over and over, for everything is in it. We want to give our children the broadest education as possible. We want to maximize their opportunities. This isn't about channeling them into becoming a rabbi or the sort of Jew that we are, but to make sure that they have the tools to be the sorts of Jews that they decide to be when it's their time to make that decision. And so this is the focus of Jewish education. We teach them whatever we can. We hire whoever we need to fill in the gaps, and we know that the best thing that we can do to inspire a love of Judaism and the Jewish people and our children is to make sure they see us loving Judaism and loving the Jewish people, and that's the center of Jewish parenting, along with everything else that parents have to do. We get to the dreaded bar or bat mitzvah, and we'll close things out here. The Jews become adults for ritual purposes at 12 and a half for girls and at 13 for boys. And the traditional practice was to mark the occasion by calling the young man to the Torah on the occasion, and if he had a nice voice, to chant the Haftorah. And there was also usually a meal of some sort, and maybe some singing. Roughly 100 years ago, this custom was extended to young women in limited circles before ultimately becoming widespread in the liberal movements. Along the way, we lost our minds. This is the, I've been at B'nai Mitzvah that cost more than I make in a year. I've been to B'nai Mitzvah that cost 5 times as much as my wedding cost. It's simply unreal, the extravagance with which this has become. Most of the fights I've had in synagogues as a congregational rabbi have been about B'nai Mitzvah, who gets to do them, what are the requirements, what's the reward. It is, it's dying down a bit, but for the past 20 years or so, it's been really out of control. That we know that this is not always the case. You talk to the older members in our congregation, this was not their experience to have extravagant parties and to do the crazy things that happen today, but it somehow became a marker of societal status, of whatever. Whenever people start talking about things as a rite of passage, I think that's a good time to get nervous. I don't think traditionally the bar mitzvah was a rite of passage. It was just recognizing that, well, you're old enough to be in a minyan. You're old enough to fulfill ritual responsibilities in the synagogue, and we're going to do that now. And there was not nearly the fuss or the extravagance that we've endured in the past. In the past 2 decades, things are becoming under control. I mean, for mostly regrettable reasons, we're running out of children. But this is what a bar or bar mitzvah is traditionally, and I think we all have experience about what it's become, and hopefully we'll recover some sense of purpose to do it. I mean, throughout it all, I have worked with parents who have been grounded and have recognized the need to keep perspective. I mean, throughout all the craziness, there were always these islands of hope that I would latch on to, that people would say that, well, no, it's ridiculous what people are doing. Let's do it smaller. Let's make it more meaningful. Let's make it more real. I mean, that should be lauded, and more of that, please. Less of the crazy stuff we've seen. I think we saw there was something on the news about like a multi-million-dollar bar mitzvah in Texas over a few weeks ago. But that's the state of we've got the kids up till their adulthood, a few years away from when they're going to be ready to become parents themselves, to find that special someone and to get married. And that's where we will pick up the story in 2 weeks. And I think I spoke longer than I was supposed to again, but happy to stay on and answer any questions, and to absorb any comments or reflections.
And when I was growing up, the boys read Torah on Shabbat morning, but the girls was Friday night, did not read Torah. They just led some prayers. Was that just a transitionary period? Is it different now?
I think it's transition. I mean, certainly for my entire career as a rabbi, and we're talking a quarter century now. For my entire career, I love being old, I think. But for my entire career as a rabbi, the preparation in the conservative setting, we did not treat differently in any regard the expectations for boys and girls. I mean, we had higher expectations for the girls, sort of like because there's a puzzle. At the given age, the girls are about 6 months more mature than the boys. And so do you honor that asymmetry and say, well, the girls go at 12 and a half and the boys at 13? People don't like that. So we end up doing everyone at 13. And your experience as a rabbi, as a bar mitzvah tutor, the young ladies that you tutor, you're thinking, man, these would be great babysitters for my kids. And the young men, you're thinking, I am not going to leave the room with him alone in the room. Because that's really scary. So there's a tremendous difference in maturity at 13 between young men and young women. And I don't know what to do about it other than to try to do it at different ages. But we have the same expectations formally, but we realize that the girls are going to usually do a much better job.
And in the conservative movement, the girls will read from Torah.
Absolutely. For my entire career, that's been the case. In the Orthodox world, they're working on sort of like an arrangement which sounds more like what you're describing in your childhood, and that the boys read Torah and lead the services. The girls have their own occasion, but it's not a bat mitzvah. They'll read like something from a Megillah, like the Song of Songs, or something that's not ritually required, and give a speech about it, and have the party and have the recognition, but won't do exactly the same thing that the guys do.
Mm-hmm.
You said something about being redeemed if you were not a grandson of a Kohen or a Levi. Could you explain a little bit more about this custom?
Well, if your grandfather is a Kohen or a Levi, you're already redeemed, because Kohanim are Leviim, and you're already in the priestly caste. So you're a priest if your grandfather is a Kohen or a Levi. You're already in the priestly caste. So you don't need to be redeemed in that case. You only need to be redeemed if you're a lowly Israel like me.
What is it to be redeemed? What do you need to? Why do others who are not priestly by birth need to be redeemed?
Because the firstborn, prior to the rise of the Leviim, the firstborn were to be dedicated to the temple. That God says many times in the Torah, the firstborn belonged to me. And that's the story of Samuel in the book of, that's the story of Samuel, that Samuel is sent, Hannah is given this miraculous child that she prays for. Samuel is born, and Samuel is immediately sent to serve in the temple, because that's what the firstborn was required to do in that time. I mean, is there any legal disability today for not being redeemed? Absolutely none. Absolutely none. It's a hangover. It's a continuation of the worldview that says theoretically the firstborn son was required to be a priest before the firstborn were replaced by the entire tribe of the Leviim. Does that help?
Thank you. I never heard of it before.
I thought I saw the Libbies had a comment.
The bar and bat mitzvahs. When I grew up, considered back Orthodox, and we had we didn't, and then again I want to ask about that women in the synagogue, or they were not counted, stuff like that. So how does that work in?
So I mean, is having the bat mitzvah related explicitly to the idea of counting women in the minyan?
Well, I think that was the reason they didn't have them, because they were wanting with that slant Orthodox feeling that women can go out in front of them. For those reasons, that's.
Okay. You broke up a little bit. I'm very sorry that.
That's okay.
But it was kind of a package deal with egalitarianism. It is and it isn't. I mean, we have this thing in. I mean, I don't know what the history was in the conservative movement, or back when Beth Israel was not a conservative shul but an Orthodox synagogue. So I don't know the full history, but we do have this thing in Orthodoxy today where they have sort of like is similar to a bat mitzvah, but women are still not counted in the minyan. So whether or not it's a package deal is, I think it varies. But I hope I understood your comment.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering if that. When I grew up, girls did not have
Yeah. Yes. We have a very special guest here tonight, the Wicked Son, Howard. Do you have any wisdom for us, Howard Trotsky?
I was unredeemable.
You still are.
Actually, I came away from this pretty good because my grandfather was a Kohen on my mother's side.
So you are unredeemable, my friend, but you don't need to be redeemed. Some more comments or questions? This was fun for me. I missed this, I think.
I've got a question, Rabbi. It's Vicky, but I'm not sure it really pertains to what we're talking about tonight, but yet it does in the naming. Why, when you call someone up to the Torah, they go by the father's name, but when you do it for Mishaberach, it's the mother's?
It's so the answer to the first one is misogyny. That the father's name is considered to be like the formal, most important name, and the Torah is like the very important thing. And the answer to the second one could be misogyny too, that women are considered to be more nurturing, and that so we want to evoke the maternal name when somebody is someone in need of healing. It's not halakhic, it's cultural. I think that we do in our synagogue. It depends who the gabbai du jour is, but I think that we do make an effort to say both the father's and the mother's name for people that are being called to the Torah as an expression of egalitarianism. I don't really think that, I wish if I was king of the Jews. I'm not the king of the Jews, but I wish that we used the English names for the Mishaberach, simply because that would give information to the community about who we need to pray for, who we should keep in our prayers, and who we need to visit and support and think about. That, obviously, if somebody doesn't want to be identified, we wouldn't identify them, but it's a lot more useful for the congregation to hear the name that they know the person by. And you know what? God knows English. It's, that's, but again, that's, you can't fight tradition. You can't fight tradition. You'll lose, I know. But if I could, if I had the ability to make those sorts of changes, I would really prefer that we prayed for people in the names that we knew, because God knows all of the names.
Thank you.
So it was, again, it's been a while. I feel happy to be back in the saddle a little bit. This was fun for me. I hope it was fun for you too. We will get together in 2 weeks and have the talk about marriage. Think of your questions, because this is kind of an evolving topic. I think it's going to be kind of difficult. It's complicated these days. So, but we will endeavor to talk about it with all of its complications. And I wish everyone a happy week. Enjoy the thaw while you can. It's the cold is coming back.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Good night, Eleanor. How you doing?
Good, very well, thank you.
Terry, how you doing? I got your note. It's your Hoftorah is on the way. And Howard, it's good to hear you as always.